Let me start off by saying that over the last decade, I have watched most of the IPs I enjoy and give a damn about get ruined by talentless hacks that couldn't tell a story if it was giving them a pair of Arabian goggles.
Quick, down! Hurry up!
Hurry up, dude.
Shamas! Wake up! I just got disgraced by the Arabian goggles.
Liam, you fool. We must get revenge.
Some of these include Aliens, Terminator, Predator, RoboCop, Resident Evil, Jurassic Park, Fallout, Nightmare on Elm Street, Warhammer 40K, Lord of the Rings, Doctor Who, and all things Marvel.
I am very disappointed!
As I have finally completely completed the PC port of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, I'm going to break down exactly why this game, Intergrade, and the remake are all overrated, poorly written, and poorly designed games. For the sake of convenience, though, I will be calling the remake, Intergrade, and Rebirth just the remake for the rest of the video. Now, first things first, I'm an enormous Final Fantasy VII fan, and not a fan like most of Hollywood is a fan of whatever IP they're talking about at that given moment, but a real fan. For me, the original Final Fantasy VII is the pinnacle of top tier. It gets no better. That is my level 8 Mario Brothers. Period. The story is amazing. It has enough twists and turns to keep you invested. The characters are all well written and consistent. There is enough real emotional content to make you feel for the characters and understand why they behave and react the way they do. Now, the original was released in 1997, so it is blissfully devoid of any modern messaging. That's a plus. Now, even though I am a huge fan of the original, I am capable of being objective about the remake. There will be no confirmation or nostalgia bias involved. I will be breaking this game down and comparing it to the original. Now, some people will undoubtedly think that that's unfair. To that, I say, tough shit. If you make a remake, you're going to be compared to the original. It's in the name. This isn't even a remake anyway. As much as Square Enix won't call it this, it is a sequel in the same vein as Final Fantasy X-2. For anyone to really understand what's going on in the remake, they have to have played the original, or at least know the original story's particulars. That alone means that this is a sequel and not a remake, since a remake is supposed to be able to be understood without having to watch or read any other media. That fact right there detracts from the game's quality right out of the gate. Let's take it a step further, though. The remake isn't an RPG. It sure as hell isn't a JRPG either. The inclusion of a chapter selection, a difficulty selection, and the inability to transfer the save data from one installment to another makes this an action-adventure game, in the same vein as Assassin's Creed, and we'll be coming back around to that later. Bet. Square Enix breaking Final Fantasy VII into 4 separate games that share no actual data breaks the game on a completely different level too. The last element that really removes the remake from the RPG genre is that there's no free roam exploration. Now, let me be very, very clear about this. Free roam is not just being able to wander around wherever at any given moment. Free roam is the ability to go anywhere the player has already been whenever the hell they may feel like it. There are no "you can't go here right now" notifications, and there are no points where the game forces you to go in a very specific direction. Being able to freely explore whatever, whenever, unless an in-story reason is given, like the character saying, "I can't make it across the desert on foot, I'll need a vehicle." This is a very basic requirement of an RPG and of storytelling as a whole, but the remake doesn't have them. The original Final Fantasy VII has free roam, and any areas you may not be able to explore have in-story reasons for it and a way to unlock that area. This is a very important and rewarding part of free roam exploration. The player gets a hunch about a certain area. They spend the time to explore and discover that area, and as such they find new story threads, some new gear, maybe even a secret boss or secret materia, or hell, maybe they find nothing. This is what makes the exploration exciting and rewarding, but the remake is missing this element completely. The remake seems to replace free roam exploration with long periods of being forced to walk as slowly as possible for long periods of time, while having the game hold your hand every step of the way. When the first installment of the remake ended, we, the player, were left right outside of Midgar after an enormous battle with Sephiroth and the Whispers. When we pick up with our characters in this installment, we're in the town of Calm at an inn. This is a slight jump, and it might not seem like a big deal, but as we just start mid-flashback in a place other than where we left off, it may be a good idea to at least cover that period of time. We don't, though. We don't mention it again, actually. If you have ever played the original, then you know nothing happened during the period of time it took to get from Midgar to Calm. But since this is a remake, then it could have changed. It's just a sloppy way to start a third installment of the game. It is kind of funny, though, that little skip actually mirrors the way the player will have to travel around this world during the rest of the game. See, they decided to include fast travel in this game as a method to traverse the world. This is poorly implemented and causes quite a few issues with immersion and gameplay. The original game had no fast travel. It did, however, have multiple methods of travel to help the player move through the world in a timely manner. These methods were an airship, an airplane, a submarine, multiple chocobos, a boat, and a buggy. Now, only 4 of those were permanent. So there was a way to travel to any, and I do mean any, spot on the map. The remake does have chocobos and a buggy, but the main way to travel is fast travel, which is essentially just teleporting via a loading screen. This was a bad idea. This brings up another issue that the remake has, and that is the incessant hand-holding. The remake holds your hand every step of the way in every way possible, even on hard mode, which has to be unlocked. The fact that the remake has a mini-map with quest markers and every other damn type of marker on it further removes exploration from this game. Unlocking quests from a task board is even dumber for a non-MMORPG. At this point, the game just becomes a cycle of unlocking a quest, fast traveling to the quest marker, completing that quest, then fast traveling back to the quest giver or another quest giver. It's a very deconstructed and simplified replacement for free roam and exploration. As I said, though, the original game had no fast travel, no quest markers, no markers of any kind, besides the marker for your current location and the location of your vehicles. You had to find and remember these locations on your own. I'm sure this sounds exhausting as hell to many of you out there today, but what this does is give the player the feeling of accomplishment, ability, and success when figuring out an issue and solving it themselves, without the game telling them exactly what to do at any given moment. The remake uses every possible method to walk the player through the game. There are map markers, hint boxes, in-game dialogue, HUD directions, NPCs, there's the life stream, and even a damn bird that leads the player to certain quest locations. All these methods are used for almost every main and side quest given to the player. Look, I don't think I should really have to break down why holding the player's hand in such an overprotective mother kind of way is opposed to what the player should be experiencing in any decent RPG. A role-playing game is supposed to guide the player into its world by making the player immerse themselves into the role of the lead character or characters. When you tell the player literally every step to take, they're not immersed. They're just following directions. That removes the player from a role in the world of the game and makes them simply a voyeur to that world. More like an interactive movie. Hand-holding and RPGs are fundamentally opposed ideas. Now, the remake's world's broken up into 2 separate continents and an ocean area. One continent has 2 regions, the other continent has 4, and the ocean area has 2 singular locations. The player cannot actually walk from one region to another. Once the player reaches the end of an area, they're just shown a cutscene that essentially transports them to the next area. So you just sort of jump from area to area, much like how we just sort of jumped into the game. Anyway, each of these areas is basically identical. Not identical looking, mind you, but as far as gameplay, each area has the exact same 9 quest types that every other area has. You have Fiend, Classified, Activation, Excavation, Expedition, Divine, Phenomenon, Chocobo, and Moogle missions. Each of these missions has a quest marker on your minimap, and they're all listed for you on the map menu. Usually you'll start the region with an activation quest, which will show you new markers on your map, and each mission you complete subsequently will show more map markers. So you'll just fast travel from marker to marker until you've completed all the markers in that area. You'll know they're all completed because of the map list in your map menu for each region. There really is no way to get lost or lose your place in this game. Even losing a minigame or a battle is a real impossibility because all you have to do is pause the game and restart the quest or fight from either the last checkpoint or the start of the quest or fight. Every quest or battle in this game has this as an option in the pause menu. Of course, again, the original had none of these make it easy tools. There were no quests that you were given with markers. In the original, you have objectives that you have to figure out how to complete on your own. Sometimes it's as simple as going and getting an item from a crazy casino owner. Other times it's more complex than that, but never is there any hand-holding along the way. The best you might get is a highlighted word in a dialogue box to draw attention, but if you ignore it, that's on you. You're on your own. There's also no Intel tab in your main menu to give you a way to bookmark your progress. You just had to remember. Or cheat, of course. Since this game has removed quite a lot of gameplay by removing the free roam exploration and telling the player exactly where to go every step of the damn way, that time has to be filled with something else. And in the remake, that something else is minigames. This game has 20 minigames. Not an exaggeration, literally 20. 20 fucking minigames. There is a minigame to complete most of the quest types I mentioned previously. There is no story reason for most of these quest-ending minigames to even exist. Their constant presence makes entire sections of the game feel like you're really just jumping from minigame to minigame. Things that aren't even really minigames will start to feel like minigames from their unreasonably frequent use. Did the original have minigames? Yes, of course it did. However, with one exception, those minigames were localized to the Golden Saucer. So the original had the G-Bike, the submarine, snowboarding, basketball, arm wrestling, the Mog House, and the 3D Battler minigames. But these minigames were all very basic and simple minigames that existed only to acquire GP to use for Golden Saucer prizes, with the exception of the Fort Condor minigame, which doesn't even have to be done at all, but does have a story reason for its existence. The Golden Saucer is a huge casino resort, so having minigames here does make sense. Putting minigames in every area and region of the game to complete even simple tasks is just lazy, shallow, and repetitive. To further point out the remake's inadequacy by comparison to the original, let's talk about the combat encounter system. Even the enemy encounter system fights against the basic function of combat in any normal RPG. In the remake, you have to actually find the physical enemy, then choose to engage him or not, then hopefully defeat them. When this enemy is defeated, they're just gone. You can't fight them again until you leave the area and possibly let them respawn, or hold a button and restart the fight in specific cases, which is just lazy. Also, there are only so many places in each area or region where enemies can even spawn. This really makes leveling up a real annoyance, and the remake tried to remove level grinding from the game altogether. There is a level 70 cap on all of your characters, and by the time you get to the end of the game, if you've tried to complete most of the quests, then you'll either be max level or damn close to it anyway. The original had a random encounter system. This would cause a battle to sort of happen at random intervals, where you would be brought into a battle area to fight. These intervals could be increased or reduced if the player had the proper materia, say enemy lure or enemy away materia. Now, this could have been done in the remake, and I think would have made the combat actually work better with the player, and wouldn't make grinding to level up so damned irritating. See, the original was trying to let the player have the freedom to level and customize each player character however they wanted. The remake doesn't really allow this level of customization for its player characters, though. As far as customization goes, the remake's game mechanics don't really allow for the player to really customize each character past just basic types, like healer or tank, etc. The main reason for this is due to the broken and limited materia system that they used. Now, I've heard many people claim that the remake's materia system is identical to the original's. This is a completely idiotic thing to attempt to claim. In the remake, when you master a piece of materia, that's it. You know the spells attached to that materia. That's the end. In the original, however, when you master a piece of materia, another piece is born. This changes the entire dynamic of the system. On top of that, materia in the remake can only be combined with other very specific types of materia. In the original, there was very little or almost nothing that couldn't be combined together to make some insanely powerful combinations. The remake has none of this customization available. What each materia can and can't be combined with is listed in the information tab of that piece of materia. It's very broken, it's very limited, and it's sterile as hell. Forget about all the materia types that they just removed from the remake. Look, when including items, skills, and gears in a game, the devs are supposed to think up ways to get that player to want to play around and experiment with them. The devs for this remake didn't do that at all. There are so many things that were included just because they were included in the original, but no thought was put into how to make the player want to play with them or why they were included in the original in the first place. Here are a few of those elements. Stealing, morphing, the entire enemy skill mechanic, the item economizer. How about the materia earrings, which were just a stupid idea anyway? There's so much more. Out of all the command materia in the game, that's the yellow materia, assess is the only one the player will really use, and that's only if the player wants to complete the Chadley VR arena. And even Chadley gets partially pushed out of his own VR arena by some insufferable VR girl named Mai. But we'll come back around to that mess later too. Most of the rewards for completing Chadley's VR challenges are useless, since you'll have almost all of them beforehand anyway. This battle arena isn't set up to teach you battle skills you might not have thought of, or battle skills that you really need to learn. It's more like a place that the devs thought up to torture the player, with fights that only serve to teach you how to do worthless things like win a fight while your entire party are toads, which is a skill that you'll never need to know in-game. This isn't more obvious anywhere like it is when playing Chadley's brutal and legendary battles, though. a slew of 10-string battles done survival style, with combos of enemies that hit you with every hateful status effect in the game. There's only one reward for almost all of these battles that's worth getting, but you'll not feel any accomplishment for completing this Herculean task, mainly because there will be no one left to use your new accessory on. You'll also have to go through something similar to acquire each of the summons in the game. The original game had no Chadley, so there was no Chadley VR Arena. All the combat challenges were contained in the Golden Saucer Battle Arena, which was done in a much more creative way. Simpler? Yes. More creative? Undoubtedly. Look, there were two types of battles, normal and special battle. Normal was just that, normal. It was just a series of battles you had to complete survival style. Each successful battle would give you points, depending on how well you did during the battle, depending on how many points you got. The best was killing the enemy without magic summons or healing. After completing the series, you could spend those battle points on rewards of your choice. There were rewards stretching from an X potion to a legendary summon materia to Cloud's level 4 limit breaker Omni Slash. The special battle was basically the same, except after each battle in the series, the player would have to spin a slot machine that would break a battle function. That player could lose their weapon, armor, materia, HP, MP, or be hit with a random status effect. And this is after each battle in the series. As you can imagine, depending on your luck, you could really get the shaft in these fights. It was a serious pain, but it was fair, and upon completion, you've acquired Omni Slash, W Summon, and a replica of Sephiroth's sword, the Mass Immune. As far as summons go in the remake, having to acquire summons through a VR arena is just nonsensical too. Look, at the start of this game, during the flashback sequence, the player is given an in-depth explanation as to what Materia is. Materia is a concentrated stone of the life stream. This makes it a physical representation of condensed knowledge from the life stream. Now, that being the case, how in the holy mother of does some robo boy make a piece of summon materia from a third-party person fighting a virtual bad guy in a virtual arena? It makes no sense. Look at the monkey. In the original, the player would find the materia, then sometimes would battle the summon to acquire it, but most times, finding the materia was enough to get it. It's a simple equation there. Finders keepers. On top of that, in the original, the only limit to how many summons could be equipped at one time was how many materia slots that player character had. So having 16 summons equipped to one player character was a possibility and a common player type as well. In the remake, each player can have only one summon equipped at a time. This is partially because they altered how the summons work. Summons work more like they do in Final Fantasy 15, like the Aeons, which is actually a frequent tactic that these devs use, just repurposing elements from other Final Fantasy games.
Excuse me, I believe I asked you to put a chick in this and make her gay.
Yes, the
Devs.
was a little confused what you meant by that.
It means put a chick in the game and make her fucking gay!
We'll come back around to that later, too. In the remake, the summon is like a temporary player character that gets brought into the battle. This isn't bad by design, but the way it was implemented is a bit dumb, since you can't just cast a summon whenever you want. You have to wait until a summon bar fills up. Then, any player can use their actions to summon, then make the summon perform certain abilities. Then, after a certain amount of time, or if the summoner dies, then the summon will perform a final action upon leaving the battle area. The fact that players who didn't cast the summon can make it use abilities is a bit stupid, since there is an obvious connection between the summoner and the summon, but that's not a deal breaker. It's not a huge deal. The original treated summons like a magic spell. The player could cast a summon whenever they pleased, and upon casting the summon, it would perform the same singular specific action each time it was summoned, and then leave. This is actually a better system because it is used, then it's gone, and the player can use it whenever they please. The simple fact that the player has to wait to be told by the game that they can cast a summon if they want makes it a poor replacement for the original summon mechanic. All that being said, the original game wasn't perfect either. The OG Final Fantasy VII was barely held together with bubblegum and duct tape. Those devs could barely get the game to function correctly, which is why stuff like the darkness status effect had no actual in-game effect. Let's not forget about overflow damage either. How about this cinema where Aerith dies? That was notoriously broken. Other cinemas were broken as well. Being able to skip entire areas of the game or glitch boss fights to win instantly. You know, so the original isn't a perfect game, and as such, the remake isn't a complete loss either. Okay? The remake's graphics are stellar. It looks absolutely amazing once you get past all the pop-in. The in-battle combat system does give the player the freedom to dispatch the enemy in a plethora of ways. The pressure stagger system, it's a good addition too, though it doesn't work too well with the elemental weakness system. The stagger system kind of overshadows that system a bit. It's still a good addition. The sound, it's okay. The sound itself is good. Unfortunately, though, a lot of the musical choices in more than a few areas seem to be tone deaf as hell. The death metal for short minigames in other areas was just too much.
Settle up! Let's ride!
There are a few tracks that sound like they were stolen from the forest stage in Sonic Adventure 2. That's Sonic Adventure as well, not the number 2. You know what I mean. There's also a pretty frequently used track that sounds like it was ripped straight from the original Alien soundtrack. So the remake has some positives, and the original had its problems. But what the original didn't do was break its own game, story, and characters to have modern messaging. This is easily noticed by anyone who picks up the worthless subversion and empowerment materias, which are never required to use or fun to play with. Very subtle, by the way. Speaking of subtlety, when the original Final Fantasy VII was released, it was heralded as the greatest game ever made. Hyperbole? Maybe. But that says something, that they were even okay with saying something like that on the back of the box. This remake, on the other hand, isn't being heralded as anything, but maybe a cash grab, if for nothing else than breaking it up into $80 sections. So many things were removed from the story and OG game to make room for minigames and NPCs that tick boxes. So let's break some of these things down. There is no Rocket Town, the home of the guy who flies you everywhere in this game. Nope, just get rid of it. There is no Medeal. See, that's where Cloud and Tifa actually fell into the live stream and got Mako poisoning. But we're just going to get rid of that. How about the Forest of the Ancients? Now, this was a bonus area in the original, but it did have some tasty hidden treasure. But we don't need it for the remake. Get rid of it altogether. How about the Ultima Materia? It's like the strongest magic spell in the game. Nope, don't need that. Normally it was given in North Coral as sort of a reward for experiencing Barrett's backstory, but no, we can just get rid of that altogether. Yeah, how about the weapon shops, materia shops, armor shops, hell, all the shops all together? They're all useless. I didn't use any of them in any playthrough of any of these installments. How about the entire continent of Wu Tai? Yuffie's home? Nope, we're just gonna wipe that continent right off the map. Treat it like California after an earthquake. And last but not least, Cloud's agency was removed from the remake altogether and given to Yuffie, Aerith, and Tifa. You know how ridiculous it is for Aerith and Tifa to be telling Cloud how to be a soldier? This guy has spent the last 5 years of his life doing exactly that one thing. Tifa and Aerith, on the other hand, are a bartender and a flower girl who was tortured by these people. I'm sure they really know what it takes to be a soldier. This isn't the only way that they shafted Cloud in this remake either. This game wouldn't even be able to be completed without Yuffie, of all people, who was a bonus secret character in the original, meaning you could beat the entire game without ever unlocking her. Yuffie was only in the original to steal all your materia from you, which she does do when you eventually make it to Wu Tai in the original. And even after everything that this group goes through, she is only there to steal your materia. She is not a misunderstood hero like they try to paint her in the remake. Of course, trying to paint elements of the story as things they're not is applicable to the Whispers too. The inclusion of the black and white Whispers is part of what makes this game a sequel and not a remake. Unless you have played the original or at least know the story of the original, these Whispers make no damn sense story-wise. Also, if white Whispers were always a thing, why didn't they appear in the first installment? The whole idea breaks the story in favor of obviously telegraphed subversion. This includes characters from other Final Fantasy VII installments like Cissnei, from Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core. She's shoehorned into the Gonganga story, which is supposed to be dedicated to Aerith because Zack's parents are there. That being said, there were areas meant to be attached to specific player characters. Midgar was for Tifa, Coral is for Barret, Gonganga is for Aerith, Wu Tai is Yuffie's, Nibelheim is Cloud's, Rocket Town was Cid's, the Golden Saucer is Katesith's, Red 13 had Cosmo Canyon, and, well, Vincent has a coffin in the bottom of a dirty manor. Each character having a hometown makes exploration rewarding. It also adds to the world building, but the remake doesn't have most of this. I played through every installment to 100%. The original, the remake, Intergrade, and Rebirth. After playing through the normal mode and Rebirth and unlocking and finding everything available outside of hard mode, it took 168 hours, which sounds like it would hit the mark for content, but when playing through hard mode and playing only what needed to be played to beat the game, it took a whopping 14 whole hours, meaning that this RPG, this action-adventure game, only really has 20 hours of gameplay. And that's being generous. That is not okay for an $80 RPG. This is why breaking one game into multiple separate sections doesn't work. Let's keep going, though. I'm not done beating this dead horse yet. The leveling system for the remake was broken into 3 separate sections to make the game look more in-depth than it actually is. Here's where we come back to the elements that were taken from other Final Fantasy games. There is the weapon leveling system that was taken from Final Fantasy IX, the folio system which was taken from Final Fantasy X, the card game that was taken from Final Fantasy VIII, the summon mechanics from Final Fantasy XV. All those poorly copied systems are just laziness. And lastly, the normal character leveling system, which caps out at level 70 for no good damn reason at all, other than the devs didn't want the player to be able to power level and make the hard mode even easier than it already was. As much as Square Enix doesn't want to be attached to Sweet Baby Inc. anymore, the remake, Intergrade, and Rebirth were all made under the iron fist of Sweet Baby Inc. And you can easily see it in-game. I think these NPCs sufficiently show its presence. They don't even look like they belong in this game's world. Now, is the messaging so ham-fisted that it makes me want to pull out my fucking ball hair with my teeth? No, it's not that bad. It's not up there with, say, Concord and Dustborn, Veilguard, or movies like Emilia Perez or She Said. The social messaging is, however, still in there, and irritating when they diminish or remove characters that already check those boxes to include garbage characters like these. Like I said before, They don't look like they belong in this game's world. This applies to other elements too, like the igneous blade and the whale fish that rescues Tifa. These elements don't look like they belong in the ghetto cyberpunk-style world of Final Fantasy VII. It seems like these devs didn't understand that not all Final Fantasy games exist in the same world. The inhabitants of Cosmo Canyon get the shaft too. An entire region become an allegory for Scientology, making their chief leader Bugenhagen a grouchy asshole who has to be told how to think correctly by Tifa and Aerith. This is a guy who's been alive for 130 years and a scientist of some note in the area of planetology. I think he might just know some shit that Tifa and Aerith don't know. Of course, since he is an old man, he has to be told by the females the right way to think. The only part of Cosmo Canyon that these devs didn't fuck up is Seti, Red 13's father. He's still a hero. They even pushed Chadley aside in his own VR arena by some brain tick named Mine. This also makes no sense, because why the hell would Chadley program an insufferable bitch he can't tolerate as his own assistant? He wouldn't. Also, why even create Chadley at all if you're just gonna start pushing him aside in the next installment he's in? So her inclusion was only to push messaging, because there is no reason for her to be there at all, especially from the player perspective. She doesn't do anything but interrupt people and correct people. Look, there are a metric ass ton of things this remake screws up for the story, the items, the characters, and hell, even the mechanics of the game. So, in conclusion, I can only give Final Fantasy VII, the remake, Intergrade, and Rebirth a 3. 3 out of 10. 3 for the graphics, the in-battle combat, and the sound. Everything else, and I mean everything else, is a broken, lazy, minigame-filled mess wrapped in empty modern social messaging. For a set of games that cost over $500 million, I expect it to be a mind-blowing masterpiece, and my expectations are not unreasonable. The original was the most expensive game of its time at $45 million, and that was labeled as the best game ever at its release, and nobody refuted that at the time. This game, to me, is the poster child for what is wrong with the gaming industry as a whole today. I mean, how could you remake a game that was so successful it changed how RPGs were made from then on and not have it be just as successful, or more so, somewhere near there? That shouldn't even be a possibility, but alas, it happens constantly now. A pretty significant reason a lot of games do not do as well as they could is because of groups like Sweet Baby Inc. They decide how the devs are gonna make their games through sheer lying and manipulation. Former Ubisoft devs are not the people you want to listen to about how to make a game. They weren't even good enough devs to continue being Ubisoft devs, for f***'s sake. Also, people like Kim Belair.
Go have a coffee with your marketing team and just terrify them with the possibility of what's going to happen if they don't give you what you want.
Need to stay the hell away from the gaming industry as a whole. Keeping groups and activists like that as far away from creativity-based industries is a great place to start improving. After that, stop focusing so much on the graphics. Relearn how to write a good story without putting social messaging in it, unless that is the point of the story in the first place. Last, put the marketing and sensitivity departments back in their fucking corner. These people are not qualified to determine the direction any game development should go in. Hopefully the last installment of this remake will be better now that Square Enix isn't tied to Sweet Baby Inc. or DEI Detected. This alone will allow them to create freely without social quotas. That's a good thing. Well, I think that about concludes this video, and I think I've adequately explained why these remakes are just empty cash grabs, especially when compared to the originals. Now, I'm tired of speaking and hearing myself speak, so I'm sure you are too. But thanks for watching. Be well.
Be fucked.
Johnsman, you are fined 1.